Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Blue Marble Science. I've got the absolute worst interpretation of GPS that has ever been put out. There is literally nothing right about this. Nothing. Of course, it's brought to you by our old friend Brian's Logic. Now, when we said, "How stupid can you be?" Brian didn't realize that was a question. He thought it was a challenge. So take it away, Brian.
So I'm sorry to the people who follow the globe. I'm sorry that this video is going to hurt you. And it is going to hurt you. You're not going to like this video. You're going to hate me. But all I'm doing is I'm just a messenger. I'm showing you, you're wrong. There's no way out. You're wrong.
Wrong, 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 wrong.
That's it. There's no if, buts, maybes. There's no Einstein this. There's no any of the rest of it. You're wrong. You don't understand this. And this is only one section of my presentation. I'm sorry. Doesn't work on the globe.
Well, somebody's wrong, Brian. What do you want to bet it's you?
Well, how are you doing? Okay, I'm going to try and make this video as quick as possible because I don't want to spend too long on it.
Yeah, well, it turns out quick is 36 minutes. Brian, we can put satellites in low Earth orbit in less than half that amount of time.
You might hear a bit of background noise. My housemate is up and I have some cats moving around here as well. Okay, this video is going to be about how satellite navigation cannot work on a globe. Okay, it's not about how it does work, right, over a flat plane. That's a different video. I have detailed that in a presentation I did on this subject sometime last year and many years ago as well. I somewhat detailed it. But this is more about how it doesn't work and how it can't work on a globe because of what the receiver must do, right? So I'm going to, rather than going through the whole presentation I did or parts of the whole presentation I did last year, I'm just going to focus on this part because this is equally as important as how the satellite navigation or GPS, so let's call it, actually does work, right? Not claiming there is things flying around in the sky or there isn't. It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Where the signal is coming from doesn't matter to me. It's about how it's claimed to work, and I'm going to show how it can't work on a globe Earth. Okay. Pay attention to this because we're going to be coming back to this at the end. First of all, I'm just going to show some slides. So, right, this is the subsatellite point here, right?
Brian, every satellite is constantly over some point on the Earth. That point is what you're referring to as a subsatellite point, but that point is of absolutely no interest to us. It's not used by GPS to find the position of the GPS receiver. You're trying to force this to be triangulation when it is not. GPS uses trilateration. We have no interest in knowing what point on Earth the satellite is above. What we're trying to determine is what point on Earth the GPS receiver is above. So this stuff about the sub-satellite point is simply a straw man, Brian. That's all it is.
Here is an angle to the satellite, which is here, from one position on what would be they're trying to claim is a globe Earth, and on a second position, which what they're trying to claim is a globe Earth, right?
You talked about a GPS sub-satellite point, and while we can't say that doesn't exist, obviously it does for any satellite, but it's not used. Nothing like that is ever used, and you can't find a single reference in any piece of literature ever published on GPS. This is just something you've made up, Brian. Let's get rid of that. Next, you talk about this angle alpha you show up here. You think somehow or the other the GPS satellite knows where your receiver is so that it can come up with that angle. Obviously, that is not true. The satellite has no idea where you are. More than that, your GPS receiver doesn't know where it is. So it has no idea where to look for the satellite. Now, you've tried to say that because it's got a magnetic compass in it, it could somehow or the other find an azimuth. Even if it could do that, you can't find the elevation angle. There's nothing in your GPS cell phone that tells it what the altitude angle of the satellite is, Brian. That's another straw man. Then you talk about the arc distance across the surface of the Earth to the subsatellite point, which we've already said is a straw man. You know, you're just building an army of these little guys, aren't you? So let's talk about how GPS actually works. And it's a process that's usually referred to as trilateration. And it works like this. Let's say this blue thing here is a football field, and let's put a football down on it. Some point like that. Now we know the exact location of all four corners of the field, but we don't know where the ball is. If we can measure the distance from one corner to the ball, then what we know is the ball is somewhere on a circle that is that radius. So most of that circle is not even on the field, but a big chunk of it would be. So we still don't know where the ball is. Now we add a second circle, a second measurement to another corner. Now we've got two intersecting circles. They're intersecting in two locations. One point will be not on the field. The other point is at the location of the ball. If we're clever enough, we figure out which intersection isn't on the field, and we only need these two circles. But if we want to be sure about it, we measure a third corner. Now we've got 3 points and distances to those 3 points, and that can only describe one unique position on the field. This is trilateration. That's how GPS works. I really should refer to GPS as multilateration because we're using more than 3 satellites. We're using at least 4 of them. But let's replace the ball on the football field with a GPS receiver, and let's replace the corners of the field with 4 GPS satellites. Now, every one of those satellites is transmitting information. And the information it's transmitting is where it is and what time it's at that position. The receiver, on the other hand, is listening to all 4 of those satellites. And by knowing what time it receives the signal from the satellite, compared to when the satellite said it sent the information, it knows the time of flight. In other words, the time it took the radio signal to go from the satellite to the receiver. Electromagnetic waves basically travel at the speed of light. So simply multiplying the time of flight by the speed of light will give us the distance to the satellite. There are some corrections that we won't even get into. But that's the basics of it, Brian. Just exactly like the ball on the football field. The 4th satellite is actually being used to improve the accuracy of the GPS clock in the receiver. So let's see what that looks like spherically. With one GPS satellite, it is emitting electromagnetic radiation, radio waves in other words, in an expanding sphere. When we add a second GPS satellite, those 2 expanding spheres of electromagnetic radiation are going to intersect at a circle. When we add a third sphere of expanding radiation, you then get 2 intersecting points. And when we add the 4th satellite, you get 1 unique point, and that point is very accurate. So that is how the system actually works. It is not triangulation. That's what you're trying to force it to be, Brian, and it is not. It doesn't work that way. There is no use made of any subsatellite point. We don't try to measure any distance across the surface of the Earth from the subsatellite point to the receiver. None of that nonsense.
Because no matter what way they work it, even if you take a straight line across from here straight over to here, that straight line will not match the distance between here and here. And that's where the receiver will be. This is where the subsatellite point will be. What's important to remember for this video is I'm detailing what would happen, right, from a cold start with a receiver. So if I'm using my receiver in the Netherlands and I turn it off and I turn it back on again in Texas, right, the receiver doesn't know where it is. It has to find where it is, which means it has to connect to 4 or more sources, right? Let's call them satellites because that's what they call them here for the globe, right? Whatever they are, doesn't matter whether they're because I've shown in the past when I showed how it actually works, that the source of the signal doesn't matter where it comes from, whether it comes from an airplane, a ship, a ground station, and a balloon. It doesn't matter where it comes from, right? Something flying in the sky means nothing. The point is that how it's claimed to work and how it actually works. But I'm going to show here how if you start from a cold start position with a receiver, how it can't work on a globe.
Where's Wally did a video some time ago where he explained all of this to you, Brian. He explained exactly how a GPS receiver can find its position. I'm going to play a little bit of that video for you, and a link to it will be in the description.
Now, Brian asked me many times to explain how a GPS works, but he claimed not to see it or for whatever reason, he did not want to look. Now, I would love to explain this, and bear with me, this is actually super easy, barely an inconvenience. The Global Positioning System, or GPS, is a constellation of satellites. We all know that. And it's used to approximate the location of the receiver on Earth. The GPS receiver uses 4 satellites that are in the review of the receiver to resolve the equations for the XYZ coordinates of the receiver and the value d, which is the difference in time between the receiver's clock and the satellite's clock. The difference in time is important because the location is approximated using the travel time of the signal from the satellite to the receiver, and this happens in very much less than a second. The equations that are solved to approximate the receiver's location using GPS are these, where x, y, and z are the Cartesian coordinates of the receiver, a, b, c are the Cartesian coordinates of the 4 satellites respectively, and d is the difference in the time between the receiver and each satellite's clock, is the travel time for the signal from the satellite to the receiver. Okay, so that all looks rather scary to me initially. 4 equations to solve to get x, y, z coordinates and the time of the receiver. But if you look carefully, you'll notice that all 4 equations for each satellite in view, and there's 1 for each satellite. That's the minimum required to get a good 3D fix. So we can just look at one and try to understand what's going on, and the others are just simply rinse and repeat. So the first 3 terms is just a little bit of Pythagoras in 3D. Difference in each of the 3 dimensions squared, added, and square rooted. How simple is that? The second part is the known distance away from the satellite, and that is simply multiplying the speed of light by the time taken. When the 2 distances are very close to being the same, then the receiver is said to have a fix. But wait, Wally, I hear Brian say, the receiver don't know X, Y or Z or nothing to nowhere. And I say to Brian, correct. So how does the receiver find the X, Y and Z positions of where it's at? It's super easy. It guesses. Yep, you heard me, it just guesses. Okay, let me give you a demo. Now, I like to play a little game called Where Taken. It gives you a touristy photo and you have to say which country it was taken in. So my strategy is to guess. Now, I might have a clue or I might not. And as Brian says a lot, it doesn't matter. So today I started with Australia and, well, 13,595 kilometres away. Well, that's almost half a world away. So I guess again, somewhere on the other side of the globe, and, well, Italy sounds nice, and it's 880 kilometres away. Much better, Wally. Third guess will nail it for sure. Let's try France, and it looks like I blew it. That's over 1,000 kilometres worse. Bad, Wally. Now, as going from Italy to France made my guess worse, well, let's go the other way and try Croatia. Oh, we're on par with Italy. Okay, Albania. Oh, now we're getting close. Let's try Greece, and bingo. So just guess, and based on how good or bad that guess was, make another guess. And so that's the process, just like the GPS receiver uses. A GPS receiver has a microcontroller or a mini computer which is running at megahertz or gigahertz clock frequencies, and thousands of guesses per second are super easy. And the paper I'm quoting from says that they're typically able to get to 7 decimal places with just 20 guesses on average. Now that is how a GPS receiver gets a fix, Brian. Notice that there's no need for any angles at all. It's pure multilateration.
That compass is pointing to the direction of the sub-point of the satellite or signal, right? Because it doesn't matter where the signal is coming from, it's the direction of it. It's treating it as a flat plane and giving it a direction.
Brian's going to ramble on for another 15 or 20 minutes, repeating everything he just said at least 10 more times. And then,
One éternité later.
Right? Here we are, solar elevation.
why do you think a GPS system would need to know the elevation angle to the sun, Brian?
Collective elevation, satellite elevation. As you can see, right angle triangles, that's what it uses. Azimuth, right satellite azimuth, right solar azimuth, right? It's using azimuth, right? That's what it's using, azimuth. And elevation, that's horizontal, that's what's known as the horizontal coordinate system.
It doesn't appear to me that this has anything to do with GPS, Brian.
Right? Illumination elevation angle, vertical angle measured from the horizontal plane up to the sun. When the sun is directly overhead, the illumination elevation angle will be 90 degrees. This is separate from collection elevation angle, figure 6. Collection elevation angle, a vertical angle measured from the horizontal plane up to the line of sight of the sensor. When the sensor is directly overhead, the collection elevation angle will be 90. This is separate from illumination elevation angle.
Wait a minute. If the sensor is directly overhead, what's on the ground, Brian?
What they're saying is that if the sun is directly overhead, or the sensor of the same satellite is directly overhead, then your angle to it is 90 degrees straight above your head, basically. Right? Here is the problem. Here you have, right, two angles to the same, from two different points to the same satellite, right? This is claimed to be horizontal, and this is claimed to be horizontal. Now, none of them are horizontal, right? None of them are horizontal. In reality, right, to make this work with this distance of arc between them, you must straighten out the arc, right? And this is the part we're coming to soon. And the zeniths cannot diverge for this to work. To even get your angles correct, the zeniths cannot diverge. So even if these two receivers here were working in tandem.
I don't think those are receivers, Brian. I don't think those are GPS systems at all.
They'd have to, right, have parallel zeniths for this to work, right? So they can find out, and that would then change the angle here, because once they straighten out this arc, that's going to change this angle and lengthen out, make the length of this and this hypotenuse longer. But what it will do is, if they can work in tandem, you'd have to have two of them. So this is not just one starting from a cold start. This would have to be two, right, working somehow in tandem. And they could figure out that if the satellite was halfway between both of them, or if they could figure out if they were working in tandem, but they both had different, right, my angle is this, your angle is that. That means that this satellite subpoint must be exactly here along this horizontal plane.
What this is a guy trying to misrepresent a publication. This is something that was put out by the European Space Agency, something by Airbus and Telespazio. This has to do with imaging satellites, Brian. It has nothing to do with GPS. You can read the title right there. Technical note, harmonization of terms relevant to angles. And the angles they are specifically talking about is the angle to the sun at the time the satellite passes over an area that they're trying to make an image of, and the angle of the camera in the satellite to ensure that they're getting the image they're looking for. Let's scroll down and read the description. This technical note deals with the ambiguities related to angles involved during the satellite acquisition process. After reviewing several satellite image metadata files provided by the CCMEs and the relevant scientific literature on the subject, the CQT team identified various ambiguities which are reported and discussed in this technical note. They're just trying to clear up terms here, Brian, so everybody knows what they're talking about. But the images that you're relying on, let's scroll down here and we'll find them in a second, begins with this one. And of course it shows the angle to the sun. Absolutely. That's going to be pretty important if you're trying to make pictures of something on the ground. It also shows the angle to the satellite. But that's not being measured, Brian. That is this viewing angle. That is what the ground controllers are telling the satellite to do. They want it to aim its camera in that particular direction. Now, trying to represent this as having anything to do with GPS is just basically dishonest, my friend.
Another eternity later.
In conclusion, this can't work on the globe. The receiver just has this angle here. It can't figure out even this angle, right? And even if it can figure out this angle and it has a 90 here, right? It can go, right, I have this angle here, this is 90, so it knows what this angle is, right? But that doesn't give it length of sides. And even if it did have this hypotenuse length, it can then only work out this adjacent and this opposite length, right? But that puts the sub point up here. No matter what way you twist or turn it, geometrically there is just no way out. So I'm sorry to the people who follow the globe. I'm sorry that this video is going to hurt you. And it is going to hurt you. You're not going to like this video. You're going to hate me.
Oh, we don't hate you, Brian. Why would we do that? You provide us with endless hours of entertainment with some of the dumb stuff you come up with. Hey, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to hit that little like and subscribe button down there. There's a link to my Patreon and PayPal. If you feel so inclined, I would certainly appreciate it. And with that, I guess we'll see you guys on the next one.